It's Waxing Lyrical, baby.
Hello, Waxers, and welcome to Waxing Lyrical with Mains and Duts. I'm your host, Mains, my colleague, who would never let COVID-19 stop him from doing a podcast. It's Mr. Neil Dutton. How are we, Neil?
It's hard to take COVID-19 that seriously when you factor in the fact that it rhymes with "Come on, Eileen." So that obviously takes some of the shine off the seriousness of the disease.
Well, yeah, and also I believe my understanding is that according to the UK, you just gotta grin and bear it and just get it. Really, I think is the technical way of going about it. No.
I think the one thing that this country and a few others around the world have shown that if a serious respiratory disease is on the prowl, make sure your house is stocked to the gills with bog roll.
Yeah, that's how we roll here in the UK. I hope for your sakes, your country is treating it with a bit more respect.
I mean, it's almost like my plan to, never ever get the flu by driving a red car.
Exactly. Neil, this week got a classic weird world. A guy looking for multiple jobs at the same time. And also then we have the brilliant Mark Schofield talking all things QBs. We've already done the interview. We look at the guys for this year and also look back on last year and laugh precociously at where we were a year ago. And we also make Mark sad by talking about Newcastle United again.
If at least one of us on this show has to be sad about football, we like to bring guests in and make them feel like me.
Yeah, awesome. Well, Neil, let's get this party started and let's move on with a quick weird world. Crook uses court appearance as a photo op for modelling career. A high proportion of criminals who appear at court do all they can to avoid press photographers. Not Ellis Tarling, the out-of-work mechanic, 21, appeared in court after he was caught carrying a knuckle duster at a retail park at Bristol. But it wasn't his offensive weapon that got our attention, it was his behaviour for the cameras as he left City's magistrate courts yesterday. He revelled in the press attention and certainly seemed ready for his 15 minutes of fame, adopting an array of poses, pouting and smiling for the camera, donning a pair of blue jeans and sporting a black t-shirt and a North Face jacket. Glad to see this criminal attire was up to date. So while also being a mechanic, it looks like this dude wants to be a model, Neil. Thoughts?
Well, it sounds like, he is a mechanic, he wants to be a model, but whether he'll have enough time to do that, considering that he seems to be a full-time whopper, I'm unsure.
It's when you realise that you're 21 and you think this is funny and cool, and then when you're 28 and you go for a job interview and you can't get a job and you wonder why, and it's because of such antics as this at 21.
Yeah, it's like, oh, I remember you. You were that dickhead who was on trial and thought it was a photo shoot. Get out.
We've all been there in stuff we did between the ages of 16 and 22 that we regret tremendously, and I'm sure this is one of them for Mr. Tarling.
The good thing is that the things we did when we were between 16 and 22, cell phone coverage was a lot more limited, and anyone who took a video camera on a night out with them would be laughed at till they took it home.
Yeah.
So there's an awful lot of stuff.
You'd also need to be a weightlifter to carry a video camera around when we were 21 years of age.
This is true, and most group of lads had that one mate who always brought their phone with them, Marshall, and got laughed at for it.
Marshall.
Whereas now it's just there, and if you didn't go on a night out / afternoon out, because I'm old, I don't do night outs anymore, and have a selfie with your mate, did you even go out?
Well, exactly right. If it doesn't appear on Facebook or Instagram, is it a real event?
Exactly.
We love Weird World. We hope you do too. If you've got any Weird World stories that you would like to share with us, you know where we are. At waxing_lyrical, and Neil is at ndutton13, and I'm at mainsy7. Now, let's be honest. Let's get smarter. Let's get Mark Schofield on the phone and give us his thoughts on this year's quarterback class. So, Neil, one of my favourite activities of the off season is that we get to talk to tremendously intelligent people about tremendously interesting things that make us smarter. And our yearly exercise in the world of quarterbacks starts today with the brilliant Mr. Mark Schofield inside the pylon, touchdown wire, and more importantly, Neil, our franchise quarterback. Mark, how are we today?
I'm doing well, gentlemen. It's great to be with you guys. Always fun to come on. Like you said, our little yearly chat about quarterbacks. And with everything that's going on in the world, I think what matters most is the 2020 quarterback draft class. So I'm excited to dive in about that.
So let's get straight into it, Mark. The presumptive number one, if he allows the Cincinnati Bengals to draft him, is Joe Burrow right now. There's a lot of times where quarterbacks have one season where they play and then get drafted. Burrow is slightly different. He's had two, and he was at Ohio State. He transferred to LSU, had it at best mediocre season, and then a spectacular season. Is there a cautionary tale, or is it just no one understood his talent until this year at LSU?
I think there's a couple of different ways to look at it. I think there's certainly a bit of caution to put into place because when you saw him last year, there were moments, there were flashes. You could see some of the things that we saw during this year in the rise of Burrow, some anticipation throws, some decision-making in the middle of the field, which showed you that at least he had the willingness to do that, the aggression to attack the middle of the field between the hash marks, where not a lot of other quarterbacks do that in college. And so you saw flashes, but, at the same time, people often wonder about, if somebody takes a while to put it together, are they going to be able to do it in the National Football League? But I also think that the rise of Burrow is real. There might be sort of a schematic component to it. People might want to look at how Joe Brady used him in the passing game, the things that they did with a lot of empty protections. LSU really ran a lot of 5-man protection schemes last year, whereas 2 years ago it was a lot of 6 and 7, even 8-man protection schemes, which are easier for a defense to cover. And so when you look at how he transitions to the National Football League, if it is the Cincinnati Bengals that draft him first overall, they're going to want to do similar things. But I think the rise of Burrow is real. When you look at him, dated back to Ohio State, obviously a highly touted prospect coming out for the most part. He was in a very crowded, talented quarterback room. He just needed the right situation to flourish. And we talk so much when you think about quarterbacks, the scheme fit, the landing spot, and the development are so critical. Teams are just going to have to factor that into mind. And so when Cincinnati does draft him, they're going to want to look at what LSU did with him. And I think they'll be fine drafting him. I think the competitive toughness of the pocket movement, those are things that you can't teach. And he's got that. He checks those boxes. So if I'm Cincinnati, I think the decision is done.
I know you're not big on comping players when they come through from college to their NFL counterparts, as it were. But is there anyone that you look at Burrow and you think, oh, there is some about the hair game, anyone that, basically I'm asking you to do something you don't want to do, which is obviously how you make people comfortable when they choose to on your podcast. You ask them to do something that they're not comfortable with. Is there anyone, any pro comparisons?
Right. I mean, I think when you watch Burrow from a play style standpoint, you can see flashes of Tony Romo. You see flashes of the pocket toughness, the mobility in the pocket, the willingness to make some throws off structure, outside of the pocket, to extend plays with his legs and his feet. He's not the most athletic quarterback. He's athletic enough, but his pocket movement, it's Brady-esque in a sense as well. Because Tom Brady, obviously not a super athlete at the quarterback position, but he's able to extend plays with his feet. And I think that's going to be more Burrow's path in the National Football League. He might have been athletic enough to outrace some edge defenders, but that might not happen in the NFL when everybody's a super athlete. So there's flashes of Brady, there's flashes of Romo. I think in an absolute sort of worst case scenario, I always like to give sort of spectrums of players. When you think about where he could be, I mean, you might be looking at a Garoppolo type of player where ultimately when he gets to the National Football League, maybe he doesn't have the overpowering arm, but he has the clean mechanics and that crisp release where even in, some certain settings, he's going to be effective for you. He can get you to a Super Bowl. And so I think if you look at sort of that range of possibilities from a guy like Garoppolo, that's maybe more of a quarterback that you have to give some help to, and he's not going to, you're not going to win because of, but you can still win with, to a guy that's potentially one of the best of all time in Tom Brady, that's a pretty good range of outcomes.
I think, if you offered, to take the name away and you said this is your range of outcomes for the player you're taking first overall, I think you'd have to be pretty hard-pressed to go, oh, is that it?
Right. Yeah, I mean that's a pretty decent range of outcomes. And look, fits can change. I always try to caution people. We are talking about 20, 21, 22, 23-year-old kids that are now going to be sort of out on their own and having to handle a lot of things on their own. And so external factors could pose a problem. You don't know that, but as far as on the field, I think Burrow is just about as clean as it comes at the quarterback position.
One of the things that I've noticed, people who, I'm not going to say criticise, but if they're going to bring it up as something to ding Joe Burrow and Tua Tagovailoa, have I said that right? If it is, that's the first time I've ever said it right. That the one thing that you see all the time when they're playing for LSU and Alabama is open receivers, clean pockets. So I've not heard many people criticise Burrow or Tua for any skill things or anything. So are we just assuming, as you say, that they're totally clean prospects with absolutely no weaknesses at all, as long as you can get open?
Yeah, I mean, I think they're both fairly clean. If you're going to find flaws with the two of them, when it comes to Burrow, he doesn't have that upper end arm talent, and so you might sort of look at him sort of as a quarterback that might be a little bit limited schematically. You think about, say, a Bruce Arians who likes to value arm talent and arm, and velocity at the position, that downfield vertical pass and offense. A guy like Joe Burrow might not be his top choice in this draft class, And when you look at Tua, I think with Tua, taking the medicals and putting that aside for a second, because that's obviously the big concern with him. As far as it comes to like between the lines, style of play style, traits on the field, there is a tendency for him to try to escape pockets more than he needs to. As a very athletic quarterback, there are times when he will pull the ball down, flush himself to the left, and try to make something happen outside of the pocket, where that might not always be there in the National Football League. It's one thing when you're doing it against some SEC schools or even some FCS schools when they get those, pancake type games. It's another thing when you're doing it against the Von Millers and the Shaquille Barretts of the world. And so he's going to have to learn to be more comfortable operating in and around the pocket rather than pulling the football down and extending plays. But they are both very clean quarterback prospects between the lines. With Tua, obviously, it's the medicals. That's the huge question mark with him.
See, obviously, from a fantasy lens, which, I like to look at these players, people like the mobile quarterback, the problem that a lot of people have with other players in their offense, especially like the running backs or the tight ends, are they don't dump the ball off, they take off and run themselves. Is that a similar problem that Tua will have on whatever offense he lands on?
I think so. I mean, learning to play sort of within the constructs of the offense is going to be big for him. Because like you said, look, he had three guys that might be first-round receivers that he was throwing to. He had tremendous talent around him. He's going to have to learn to sort of play within the constructs of the offense. He's going to have to learn on 3rd and 8, as much as you might want to force it downfield. You might have to check the ball down to a running back and, live for another set of downs. And so that's going to be an adjustment. But it is an adjustment for most of these quarterbacks. I mean, they're all going to be in situations with a level of talent and the ability of the guys on the defensive side of the ball to play at a higher level is going to be something like what they've seen before. And so, they're going to have to learn to be more conservative at times. But, that's an easier thing to learn, I think. For some quarterbacks, it's tougher to become more aggressive. We've seen quarterbacks struggle with that. And so for Tua, for Burrow, and some of the other guys that have to learn to check the ball down more, that's an easier adjustment, I think. If
we move down to the next set of quarterbacks, a lot of, I guess, fake headlines were made in the shouting at each other stakes between Todd McShay and Mel Kiper in the $5,000 V Foundation bet in relation to Jordan Love and Justin Herbert. Two very different seasons, two very different college systems, really. A high-powered Oregon against a struggling Utah State. Where do you stand on the Herbert Jordan Love debate on who will be better at the NFL level?
I think for both of these quarterbacks, scheme fit and development track are going to be critical. If you're asking me to pick between the two, I lean in Herbert's direction. I think, I might be one of a handful of people, however, that do that. You talk to people in and around the league, down at the Senior Bowl, out of the Combine, and there's a lot of love for Jordan Love, pun intended, in this draft cycle, because people look at the arm talent, they look at the athleticism, they think, look, this is stuff that is going to work in the National Football League. They look at Justin Herbert, they see that Oregon offense, which didn't do him a ton of favors. They have question marks about his leadership ability, and so they wonder if he can step into an NFL huddle and take command of a team of veterans, a group of veterans around him. But where I come down to this is I look at Herbert, and I see somebody that when he got outside of that Oregon offense and he was running what Cincinnati was doing down to the Senior Bowl, you saw a quarterback that could run an NFL offense on day one. You saw somebody that is willing to challenge the middle of the field, but he has a better understanding, I think, of leverage in the secondary than I think a lot of quarterbacks in this draft class. And he has the arm talent and the velocity to sort of back things up. I mean, people look at Love, they look at Eason, they think those guys have the huge arms in this class, and that may be true, but I think Eason's no slouch in that area as well. And when you look at the athleticism he brings to the table, I think Herbert checks a ton of boxes. And I know people sort of get on him, the Arizona State game, for example, but if you watch that film, you see some touchdown drives that he put together where he was making some advanced throws. One of my favorite throws out of any quarterback from this entire class is a back shoulder throw he made last year against Cal, the 2018 game, which was like a 45, 50-yard downfield throw on the back shoulder on a line. That's an impressive throw. And so I'm leaning in Herbert's direction. If it were up to me, I would draft Herbert. But other people look at Love and they see what he can do. They see the talent. They say, okay, if we have a window where we can develop somebody, he's somebody that might have the higher ceiling. But I think Herbert has the better floor of the two. And as somebody that's a bit more risk averse, that's why I sort of lean in his direction.
In a weird, this is going to sound like a really strange question. We always talk about we always talk about quarterbacks in the are they tall enough? Like Justin Herbert is huge. He's like 6'7". Is there a strange world where he's nearly too big to play quarterback?
Yeah, Paul, interesting enough, there is some evidence that taller quarterbacks struggle. There's not a lot of success for quarterbacks that are like 6'6" and taller. I mean, Joe Flacco is one of perhaps a handful of guys. And if you think back to, say, Tyree Jackson last year, if you look at Jake Luton this year, the Oregon State quarterback, the taller quarterbacks have a tendency to lock up their front leg when they're throwing. And Tyree Jackson was an example of that. Lutton's an example of that. And what that does is it almost works as a brake on your throwing motion where your forward momentum gets stopped by that violent force of locking up that front leg. So you lose velocity. It impacts your release point and ball placement and accuracy as well. And so that's why we've seen taller quarterbacks struggle. With Herbert, he's very clean mechanically, at least with that lower body. There's not a lot of evidence on film, at least, of him locking up that front leg. So he's been able to avoid some of those issues. But it is something to think about because of that mechanical break in the throwing chain between upper body and lower body that we sometimes see in taller quarterbacks.
If we just move away from the next generation, and it's quite fitting, really, that we're talking about someone with slightly dodgy mechanics. You may remember that when we spoke this time last year, Mark, we did touch on Mitchell, Mr. Trubisky. Should we just say he didn't quite develop as maybe people would have hoped in the last year?
I think that's exactly right, Neil. And, the more I think about when we study quarterbacks and we spend all this time watching them on film and evaluating them and doing scouting reports and putting grades on them or whatever, we always talk about, if this guy develops this trait or if he gets the right landing spot and develops these traits, he's going to pan out in the NFL. But Trubisky's a case of where I'm coming around to the idea that these guys just are who they are, and Trubisky is a prime example of that because if you think back to the game they had, I believe, against the Saints this year where Seth Galina, who does some great work on Twitter, broke it down. But they ran, a simple RPO stick-type play, and he had absolute vapor lock. I immediately, when I saw that, and I wrote about it as well, I forget where. I lose track of all the places I'm doing stuff. But I wrote about that play as well, and it reminded me of a play he had against Virginia his final year in college when it was a simple sort of curl concept out of a trips formation to the left. The inside receiver wasn't covered before the snap, so he thought he could just throw right to him. But then when the ball was snapped, the slot corner jumped the inside receiver, and he just froze. Rather than throwing to the middle receiver who's now wide open, he just froze, started to run around and took a sack. And now he's doing it his third year in the NFL, doing the same exact thing. Sometimes these guys are who they are, and Trubisky does have some mechanical issues with the lower body, but it's a mental thing with him right now. And as we do mock drafts, as I'm working on a thing for Touchdown Wire about, a free agent each team should explore signing. Chicago has to address the quarterback position. It's an absolute must for them. Now, they can't do it early in the draft. They don't have a first-round pick, but they need to explore the veteran market, whether it's a Marcus Mariota, trade for an Andy Dalton, something, because Trubisky needs some competition. He might have basically hit his ceiling as a quarterback, and he's come nowhere close to where people thought he would be. And so this is a team that has a Super Bowl window. Time might be running out. They need a viable option behind him if they're going to have any sort of success next year.
Because obviously, in the next few weeks, the Bears need to make the decision regarding his fifth-year option, which obviously is guaranteed for injury only. But if they're going to be bringing in competition, there's a good chance that competition is going to unseat him very early, and they're not going to be wanting to pay 20, 22, whatever million is for a backup next year. So it's to a point that, as I say, if this is who he is, you can't win with it. Presumably,
right.
It's we've seen quarterbacks get hot. Joe Flacco, Eli Manning are the prime examples, but Trubisky's getting hot has just never ever been. It's never looked as if he's going to be able to put a 3-game spell together like Flacco did in his postseason run or whatnot. No,
absolutely not. And I think if you're Chicago, you're giving serious credence to, sort of the Arians route, right? What they did with Winston, which is we're not going to pick up the option right away. We're going to let the season play itself out. And if you demonstrate that you've earned it, then sure, we'll pick it up and start talking about a long-term extension. But if we're still struggling, or if we have to go to the bench or replace you, then yeah, you've made the decision for us. And so it wouldn't surprise me to see Chicago go sort of that route and decide, look, we're going to make you earn this. We're not just going to hand you this fifth year. And so, I'm very curious to see what they do. Another quarterback that might make a lot of sense for them would be Jake Fromm from Georgia, because you look at his sort of style of play, again, doesn't have the overpowering arm, not a super athlete. But what's one thing Jake Fromm does very well? Play the quarterback position from the neck up. Very smart, heady type quarterback. I had a discussion with Derek Clausen from Little World a couple of weeks ago on Twitter, then even out of Indianapolis for the Combine, about how when we both study quarterbacks, we like somebody that does it, that plays it and goes about it like the smart, heady way, that makes checks to the line of scrimmage, that makes the right reads, that gets the ball out on time. And if that's what you need at the position, Fromm's the guy for you. And that's what Chicago's lacking right now, because they don't have somebody in Mitch Trubisky that's making the right reads, that's getting the ball out on time, that's just running the offense and just checking the boxes. Fromm can do that. And so if he's there in the second round, or if he's there some later in day 2 or even into day 3, Chicago would be very smart, I think, to give him a shot.
I do feel sorry for Allen Robinson, considering what he's had to put up with in college and the NFL. I mean, Christian Hackenberg, Blake Bortles, Mitchell Trubisky. It's like, Jesus Christ, whose cat did this fella run over?
I will say, having bumped into Mr. Robinson out in Indianapolis one night, you could hear many people asking him, look, Alan, when are you going to get a chance to play with a real quarterback? People, say things at the bar and stuff. And, we all said the right things and, smiled and joked about it and brushed them all off. But you can tell, look, between Blake Bortles and Mitchell Trubisky, it seems like the guy's career, like the prime of his career, is getting wasted here. And I'm sure if you're Allen Robinson, you'd love the chance to play with a quarterback that's at least going to get you the ball on time, right? If you're an offense like Chicago's that is going to be predicated on yardage after the catch, like these West Coast systems are, you need a quarterback that's going to get you the ball when there's that window to pick up yardage after the catch. With the Trubisky, part of the problem is he's making these throws late. He's still struggling to make anticipation throws. And yeah, they might complete throws to Robinson, but it's when he's suddenly draped in coverage again, and he doesn't have that cushion that he had if the ball came out on time. And so I'm sure a quarterback like Fromm or somebody else that could make those on-time rhythm throws, that would be a nice little boost to somebody like Robinson and his draft value and his fantasy value as well.
And Neil, Andre Johnson just called. He wants you to give him a call back in a bit.
Well, Andre Johnson played with the finest collection of Costco night shift managers that have ever played in the NFL.
When your best quarterback's like Ken Dorsey in college, you got a problem, right?
Yeah, that's a struggle.
I did weird research today. I listened to last year's interview, and it was basically a year ago. And at that point, we were talking about whether Dwayne Haskins would challenge Kyler Murray for the number 1 pick, and you were trying to tell us about Daniel Jones and why, like, it was mad to think that the Giants would take him at 17. That's right, 17. Anyway, Haskins and Jones took divergent paths from that point on to the draft, and then possibly partial divergent paths for the season. They both, a year in now, both have head coaching changes to deal with. Do you expect either of them to push on and progress in year 2, or is it going to be a struggle for both?
I think both of them are in position to be successful here in the second year. Now, I should caution that by saying, when we were out in Indianapolis, Joe Judge refused to even say Daniel Jones' name. Gettleman sort of went along the same page with that. And so that spurred the entire New York Giants media members and media market to fire away the questions like, are you moving on from Daniel Jones? Is there a quarterback battle? And so I think they sort of stepped into it a little bit. But I think Jones progressed nicely. And I've eaten a ton of crow, as others have, about sort of how we viewed Daniel Jones before the draft into what he did last year. I think he made strides that none of us really expected. And again, it just shows that, look, bottom line is we're all idiots. None of us know what we're talking about. None of us know what we're seeing and reading. And, we're, for some strange reason, paid to do this. Now, but a guy like Daniel Jones is evidence of that sort of scheme fit that matters. And what really impressed me about Jones was, the downfield vertical passing game, number one, and his ability to handle pressure in the pocket, number two. Really didn't show up a ton on film. They did a lot of 0-1-step, drops and quick game concepts at Duke. And so his ability to push the ball downfield was huge. And now when you look at their new offensive coordinator, who's an Air Coryell type guy, if they stay vertical, I think Jones is in position to have success in year 2. Haskins is the interesting one because, I live in the D.C. area, and I can tell you that the idea of Washington at least kicking the tires, if not more, on Tua Tagovailoa at 2, or trading back and drafting a quarterback, or just giving Haskins some competition. There's some fire to that smoke here. Now, I made the case on Touchdown Wire just last week that you build around Haskins. If you look at whether it's Tua this year versus, where Haskins will be in year 2, I think Haskins has the edge because he's got a year of NFL football underneath him. I think the offense they're going to be running is going to be something conducive to his talents. I think they can build around him. And plus the idea of Chase Young, a local kid to the D.C. area, as well as Haskins, who's also a local kid to the D.C. area, being the faces of your franchise for the next 5 years. I think even Daniel Snyder couldn't screw that up. And so I would still build around Haskins. But Paul, I see you look on your face. Snyder could probably screw that up.
I hear what you're saying. That's a challenge. That strikes me as a Daniel Snyder challenge.
Yeah, it's like a hold my beer moment where he would be like, he's going to trade down and then draft Jordan Love, and then it's like you missed out on Chase Young. You draft Jordan Love. You've got 2 question marks now at the quarterback position. That screams Daniel Snyder. So, I think both of those guys, Jones and Haskins, are in position to have some success in year 2. But stranger things have happened. Could Haskins be the next Josh Rosen, where new regime comes in, they draft a new quarterback, and now he's suddenly on the outside looking in? It could happen. It certainly could happen.
Oh God! I always look and just think everybody could agree it was the right thing to do, and it'll still be wrong. So
right.
they could draft Chase Young, which is the complete logical thing to do, and something bad will happen to him, not because of any other reason, just because he was drafted by Washington. I don't wish that on anyone, especially him. I don't actually wish him going to Washington because that's a bad thing. Or they'll draft Tua based on the fact that they got Dr. Nick from The Simpsons to do his medical and it was fine, and then he'll play one game and his leg will fall off or something. That's kind of I'm in the situation now where it's since 1992 that, and Snyder from mid-90s, that you're just like, I'm stunned when things go right. So when things go right, that's probably by accident. So it's like you hear Ron Rivera talking and you hear Jack Del Rio talking like professionals, and you're like, something bad's gonna happen here. I don't know what it is, but something bad will happen because that's just normal. That's what's happened for the past 25 years.
Yeah, no, it's the same sort of mood and sentiment, here in the DC area. You go to a party or a kid's birthday party, and inevitably people know what I do. The subject of football comes up, and people are just like, I grew up when this team was winning Super Bowls here, and now I can't even watch their games. Like, people are just like crestfallen, and you hear from other people that, have either friends or colleagues or know people in and around the building, and it's just a poorly run shop. It's just a mess from the top down. You hope Ron Rivera can sort of right the ship. But, yeah, they could draft Chase Young, and we could all be wrong on him. They could draft Tua, and his leg could fall off. They could draft Jeffrey Okudah, and suddenly he's not the fleet-footed cornerback that we thought he was. They could trade down and miss on everybody. Like, there's just a number of different ways that they could get this right, but it seems like there are so many more ways they could find a way to get it wrong.
Always reminds me about 20 years ago, coming out of a Sheffield Wednesday game. They'd lost, and a fan behind me just went, "Oh God, we're here again next week, aren't we?"
Yeah.
That was just the same mentality. Should we go from those quarterbacks who are at the beginning of their journey? I want to get your take on one who is nearer to the end, and we'll put it simply: where's Tom Brady going to be playing in 2020?
I have no idea, guys. If I had the answer to that question, I'd still be poorer today than I was yesterday, given what happened today in the global markets. But, I don't know. I honestly don't know. I would tell you that, how can I put this? I spent Wednesday night out at the Combine with most of the Boston beat writers, and this was the morning before that Jeff Darlington story broke. But the mood at the bar among the Boston beats that Wednesday night was almost like a wake. There is a sort of sense that Tom Brady is going to leave New England. Now, things can always change. I firmly believe that if you're Tom Brady, given where he is in his career and how he wins right now, which is with his mind more than anything else, the idea of moving to a new offense and learning, a different offense, even if it's not that diametrically different than what you're running right now, it's still going to prove difficult, because Tom Brady knows that Patriots playbook inside and out to the point where he is, during the course of a play, telling guys what to do, like the Dorsett miss against Houston that Dan Orlovsky broke down, or that video we saw from last year where he's telling James White, as he's faking him a handoff, to run a check down route, and then he immediately throws it to him. So if Brady's going to move to Indianapolis or Vegas or even Tampa Bay, which is, an interesting thought, he's going to be learning a different offense, and they're not going to be able to rebuild the entire playbook around him. And so the idea of him moving doesn't seem to make sense to me. But his dad said it himself. He said that, look, things end badly. They always do. And you do get the sense that it's leading to a parting of ways here. And the other thing is this. New England has other question marks. They have, Joe Thuney is going to be one of the top guards available in free agency. He's going to have his suitors. Kyle Van Noy, Jamie Collins, they have other needs. And if it's going to cost you $38 million per, and perhaps guaranteed money to bring Tom Brady back to pry him away, or maybe $35 million, even $30 million per, for 2 years guaranteed, that's money you can't put towards Joe Thuney. That's money you can't put towards Van Noy or Collins, or that's money you can't put towards an A.J. Green on the free agent market. And we keep hearing that, New England, they're going to have to get weapons for Brady. Well, if they lock up the bulk of their cap space in Brady, they can't do it. That's issue number one. And issue number two is people keep saying maybe they bring back weapons for one last run. Well, last year they had, at the start of the season, Josh Gordon and Antonio Brown, right? They then traded, in perhaps a panicky move, for Mohamed Sanu. They tried to get weapons last year. It didn't work out. And so, the Patriots fan in me would love to see Brady back for one more run. But the realist in me is starting to realize that, as I've been telling people to listen to my Patriots podcast, we might need to prepare for the inevitable here. And the inevitable will be coming in 7 days.
I think the one statement that you hit the nail on the head with is, everyone remembers the, storybook endings of, a couple of players who win the Super Bowl and ride off into the night in that team that they were with for 15 years. That happens once every blue moon. Right. There's, for every one of them, there's, Unitas, Favre, Montana, whoever you want to name in a shirt, Namath in a shirt, they should just never ever have worn, because that's how the league works, and that's how the league's always worked. And you know, it's just a situation where you look and you know, can it be patched up? Absolutely, but there's certain things where, you know, Tom would say, based on what you read and what you know, is that he's done them a few favours in the past and was expecting something back in return, and they've kind of given him the finger and said, well, if you want to win, well, we can't do that, and he's kind of come to the end of his tether on that. And you know, it's great that his missus earns a load of money and blah blah, but it's a principle concept rather than a monetary value concept.
Right, yeah, I think that's exactly right, Paul. And you know, what's interesting about this entire situation is that we've come to expect that Tom Brady is going to do the right thing by the organization, given the time that they've spent together. And, you know, Brady's been very good about saying all the right things about Belichick. But you do get that sense that he's like, look, I've given you everything. You know, I've taken below market value contracts for a while now. Like, I could have really tied you guys up, sort of like Drew Brees has tied up New Orleans from a cap standpoint, but he hasn't. And they've gone and they've taken that money and they've put it into, you know, Darrelle Revis or Adalius Thomas or Stephon Gilmore, guys on the defensive side of the ball, and they've tried to do more patchwork on the offensive side of the ball. And before people say Wes Welker and Randy Moss, well, you know, they gave a fourth-round pick for Randy Moss, and Welker, nobody was really signing them. Brady turned those guys around for a sense, especially Moss with sort of reinventing the second half of his career. And so Brady's done right by them. You could make the case that they haven't really done right by him other than giving him the shot years ago to unseat Drew Bledsoe. Since then, they really haven't. And so, yeah, it does seem like it's getting to that end, that sort of, you know, Favre in a Jets uniform, Montana in a Chiefs uniform, Namath in a Rams uniform kind of moment where he's going to be wearing, you know, Titan blue or silver and black next year, and it's going to look odd, but that's the business.
I think you know, as a non-Patriots fan, I could go further, but I'll just stick with that.
Right.
I have no desire to see Tom Brady suck somewhere else. Right. I don't want to see, you know, him throwing interceptions because receivers don't know he's running. I don't want to see him taking 6, 7, 8 sacks a game because the offensive line isn't good enough. I don't think he deserves that. But it's as you say, this sport isn't in the fairy tale business.
Yeah, no, it's not. And look, we mentioned storybook endings, and I firmly believe that after that Super Bowl against the Rams, both Brady and Gronk should have said, you know what, that's it. You know, we're both done. We've both given this game everything. We're going out on top. You know, the final play between the two of them really is that seam route down the left side to really sort of win that game. That's the moment to walk out on. That would have been the storybook ending. And I would tell you that in the wake of that game, I was mentally preparing for that. I was like, this makes sense. So I wasn't surprised that Gronk left. But I would have liked to have seen Brady right off into the sunset the right way. We're not going to get it, and it's going to be painful, I think, you know, whatever happens next. You know, whether he's, like you said, Neil, taking 6, 7 sacks a game or throwing picks left and right or just not making the playoffs in Indianapolis or something like that. Like, that's not the way Tom Brady's career should end. It should have ended with him on top, whether it was after they had the comeback against Atlanta or after beating the Rams. Like, you win 6. It's hard to supplant you as the greatest of all time. Maybe Mahomes will get there someday, but for right now, you're in. Now go enjoy your life. Now, we're recording this on Monday. He's announcing 199 Productions, which, by the way, is the quintessential Tom Brady name for a production company. Because I've said this with you guys before. I've said it elsewhere. When you get into an elevator with him, how quickly does the fact that he was a 6th-round pick at 199 come up? And now it's a permanent part of his legacy, a production company named 199 Productions. Maybe he goes to the Chargers and says, look, you know, I'm going to move out west, have a production company, set myself up for life after football. But either way, it just seems like we're getting towards that bad ending, and I think we all wish he could have ended a different way.
Let's move from a love that could be lost to a love that's still there or is burgeoning. I would guess, this is me guessing, Mark. I want you to wax lyrical about one man and one man only, and that is Alan San Maximan.
Oh man, do we have to go down this road? Do we have to?
We don't have to. We don't have to. But you know, that man loves a 4 celebrations after the only goal you score in 6 months. But He's fun. Like, the
He
team
is
isn't,
fun.
but he is.
The team isn't fun. He's fun to watch. I mean, gosh, it seems like what is this? The third, fourth? How many years have we come back with you guys? And it seems like at the end of each appearance, the conversation steers back to me lawning lustily with a glimmer of hope in my eyes for the days of passports with Pardee. And that is just soul crushing to think about. To think that guy would be a glimmer of hope for any football fan. But that's where we are. And again, like I've said every single time, the guy needs to sell the club. We need to get Mike Ashley out. But no, here we are. Yep. You know, we've got a good player that gives us some nice moments. We've had that before with a guy like Hatem Ben Arfa. We've had that before with some other players. But there's just like no direction. It's just we're going to settle for being a mid-table club year in and year out. We'll do just enough to avoid their drop, but there's never going to be any sort of glimmer that we're going to challenge for Europe or, God forbid, something beyond that. And we're just going to meander our way through life and eat at Arby's at the end of the day. And, you know, Neil, you sort of mentioned that guy that, you know, that was walking out of Sheffield saying, you know, God, I got to do this again next week. It's the same thing for us. It's like, gosh, you know, we might have a fun moment here and there. We might get some fun celebrations and matches we lose. But we'll be back here next week hoping for change. It's the definition of insanity. You know, doing the same thing over and over and over again, and somehow thinking it's somehow going to be different. You know,
this is a Washington conversation, but it's starting to become a very big NFL Premier League conversation. What I mean by that is back in the day, in the Premier League, or even before football was invented in 1992, like football wasn't profitable.
Right.
So if you owned a football club, you understood that you were going to lose money and accepted that. And if you didn't accept it anymore, you sold the football club.
Right.
So, like, you know, people came in and spent a lot of money and won titles and whatever. That's always happened in history. But when you got bored or didn't want to do that anymore, you sold to someone else. Now, you look at all the NFL teams. You look at, you know, Newcastle, a number of other clubs in the Premier League, especially. Like, you know, Mike Ashley needs to sell the club. Yeah, when someone makes it worth his while, and at the moment
Right.
he makes hundreds of millions of dollars from Newcastle. Like Daniel Snyder, just sell it. Yeah, why would he sell it? Like, his team could be terrible from now until the end of time, and he will make an absolute fortune, even if no one turns up in the football ground. No one needs to turn up at FedEx Field, and he still makes a fortune. Do you know, you look at the new CBA and they're saying the players are going to get an extra $700 million or whatever it is over 10 years. And the only thing I think of, if the owners are giving the players an extra $700 million,
It's not
what
out of
the heck are
charity
the owners going to win?
Right.
They're going to win billions and billions of dollars, right? Because they're like, you
Especially,
can have this because I'm getting this.
Especially when you look at the NFL and you can factor in what's coming, which is the legalized sports betting, which, you know, it's part of the Premier League and it has been for a while now. But that's going to be a new frontier for the NFL teams. And, you know, you look at the new CBA and it's clear that that's where they're going to carve out a ton of money. The owners is when suddenly you show up to a stadium, you know, they're going to have sports books at the stadium, I bet.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they're going to find a way to make it profitable or make it at least – obviously they're going to find a way to make it profitable for them, but they're going to find a way to get people back to the stadiums. And if it's, you know, like they did in years past with adding, you know, fantasy football stuff to the scoreboard because they were thinking, oh, people want to come to the games and they want to see what's happening with their fantasy teams. So they start putting fantasy stats on the scoreboard. They start adding Wi-Fi so you can stay connected to your fantasy teams on your phone. They're going to find a way to make it enticing for you to go to the game still, spend the $15 on a beer, and still play place wagers on games. That's going to be the sort of next new frontier. And so, yeah, Paul, you're right. The fact that they're giving players money in this new CBA indicates that they're going to be they expect to get more in return, partly through gambling.
Do you know, just on that topic, the first season after football was invented, 92-93, Nottingham Forest finished 22nd in the Premier League, and their prize money was £37,000.
Wow.
That's 30 years ago. That was their club overall. Compare what you finished 20th now, get relegated, get a parachute payment and whatnot. But anywho, we talked about. We've ended on slightly miserable topics, but I want to end a quick one on a positive topic. You've mentioned it as we've been talking, Mark, but you have recently joined Touchdown Wire under Doug, the great Doug Farrar. Can you give us an idea of some of the things that we can expect to get from you in the next coming weeks and throughout the season?
Yeah, I mean, it's great to be able to work with Doug again. Doug and I first started working together back at Bleacher Report, the NFL 1000 project. Long may it live in peace. Long may it rest in peace. Doug and I often joke, we did, when we were together at the Combine, the talent that came through the NFL 1000 project. You're talking about people like Derek Clausen and Justice Mosqueda, who's now basically running the XFL. Charles McDonald, who's a beat reporter now for the New York Daily News. Brandon Thorne, Duke Manyweather, even Ethan Young, who's now basically Chip Kelly's right-hand man out at UCLA. Like, Doug put together an incredible roster of football people. I was just lucky to be a part of it. But what I'm going to be doing over there is basically like NFL feature stuff. I wrote a couple of pieces last week, winners and losers of the Combine, scheme fits for the draft quarterbacks, scheme fits for free agent quarterbacks. I weighed in on the Tua and Haskins thing. I talked about Patrick Mahomes and reading defenses. I'm working on a piece on all 32 teams and a player they should look at in free agency. We'll cover free agency and, of course, the draft, and then just writing fun stuff, probably a piece a day as we get into the season, covering the league from obviously a quarterback and offensive lens. But it's a great chance to work with Doug again. He's one of the great people in this business. Couldn't be happier to work with him. Couldn't be prouder to be part of the team over there. And, yeah, it's going to be a fun season ahead. And
just to clarify, your marriages are fine?
My marriage is completely fine. Michael Kiss, however, it's a bit more of a question mark. I literally have DMs from Kiss right now saying that he's going to be playing video games all night. So sometimes I do wonder about his marriage, but his wife and he are different sleeping schedules at times because she's a nurse and things like that, works in a hospital. Obviously, she's a little bit busier right now than the rest of us are. But my marriage is fine. I think Kiss is generally solid. So, yeah, we'll look for new episodes of the QB Sco Show coming out in the next couple of days.
Fantastic. Well, thanks very much, Mark, as always, and we will let you go back to the rest of your day in America. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, guys. Always a blast.
Well, Neil, that was a brilliant Mark Schofield talking QBs and how crap Washington and Northeast sports is. Absolutely.
I think we should probably look to maybe not make it a year, but the next time we talk, because it looks like we're using him for his QB knowledge. Well, when we are.
First of all, we are. Second of all, Mark is tremendously busy, especially now with his new job at the Touchdown Wire. So I think, it's not like, let's get him on every week. There's a reason that during this part of the season we interview people because they're not as busy.
Yeah, and as much as they want to talk to us, I'm sure having gaping holes in their schedules. In case you're wondering, of course, and you don't listen to the QB Sco Show from Bleeding Green Radio, the reference in the interview to his and Michael Kiss' marriage being fine is a running joke.
Yeah, it was. That was one where you have to look and go, yeah, there's an in joke. There's an in joke here that some people may not get. Yeah, because not everyone listens to 74 podcasts on ×2 speed like you, Neil.
Well, I can't help it if I'm ahead of the game.
You can't. Neil, that's it for this week. But before we go, where can people catch you?
This week I've actually done some writing. I have written a piece about one of my favourite players coming out of the draft this year. I'm stepping on wide receiver guru's toes. I know this, but I've written about Brandon Ayuk from Arizona State. I've also written a piece for Number Fire about 5 potential landing spots for Andy Dalton. Well, I'll say 5. 4 are likely. One of them hasn't got a chance in hell of happening, but I wrote about it anyway. I will be doing a similar one probably tomorrow, or you listen to this, it'll be Wednesday. It'll either be out today or Thursday, and it's 5 landing spots for Jameis Winston. So, things are getting interesting. Free agency is nearly upon us.
Although it's not as upon us as it was 24 hours ago, as they moved everything back.
Well, yeah, but, again, I can't help it if the world doesn't keep to my timetable. But, as you say, follow me on the Twitter machine at ndutton13 for the really bad tweets.
I am at Mainty7. Most of my tweets are also bad. I'm focusing probably on me stressing about Liverpool and the league being cancelled due to coronavirus. Together we are at waxing_lyrical. We will be back soon with a new podcast, probably with an interview from someone tremendously important, or at least more important than us. Until then,
Not hard.
not hard. Until then, these top guys are out.